There was a range of cameras that I really like the look of, particularly because they were unusual, and they date from the mid-2000s, so, well, the early mid-2000s, 2004, 2005, 2006 possibly, for these Konica Minolta Dimage Z series cameras. So this one in my hand is a Z5. There was a Z6 that followed on from this, but this is not a bad model. It looks in great condition, doesn't it, for the age? It's got an appearance that is love or hate. Hopefully you can see there are no scratches or bad marks to it. There's a little bit of rubbing off here on the anti-shake logo. It's actually in fact got a proper CCD anti-shake system, which is really good. And I think the reason why this is slightly worn here is because of the camera grip. So the camera would have been held like that, and possibly the little finger might have rested down here, so that's possibly why. But otherwise it really looks unmarked. It looks like it's had very little use. The back here is very clean and tidy. The appearance of the camera is quite minimalistic. It's only really got the controls that you need, not anything extra particularly. Let's have a look at the camera. This is the bottom of the camera. The battery compartment is basically where the hand grip is. It's quite a nice sort of hand grip feeling. And it's nice to see that it takes AA batteries, which are easily replaceable. If you were out traveling with this camera, you could certainly pick up some alkalines in an emergency, but I would recommend some rechargeable batteries for this camera, and like other cameras as well. This is the memory card slot. Now, it will only take standard SD type memory cards, so not SDHC. And this one is only a 16 megabyte card. Possibly it will go up to a gigabyte and possibly beyond. I think the limit was 4 gigabytes with these memory cards. On the side here, take the lens cover off. There's a bit of information. It's an optical zoom 12 times, and that is telling us it's an equivalent of 35 to 420 mil. It's 5 megapixels. The sensor itself is 5.2, but 5 megapixels usable. Looking on the top, there's a built-in flash here. There's also a hot shoe for a proprietary Minolta style flash. So getting hold of that is probably getting a little bit trickier these days, and I'm not sure if it would be worth it for this particular camera. Looking at the top controls, we've got the button for the shutter, macro, flash mode, there's zoom here, there's the dial on top, which I've got set to standard auto, and that should choose the best setting, the auto, which selects between program auto exposure and one of the 4 digital subject programs, and that can be portrait, sports action, landscape and sunset. Let's move the dial on. We've got video recording mode, which goes up to 640 by 480 as the top mode, which is not too shabby for the time. Program exposure mode, so this controls the shutter speed and aperture to select the correct exposures. The aperture priority will allow the photographer to take pictures setting the aperture, and the exposure will be handled by the camera. Shutter priority basically sets the aperture to the shutter speed that has been set. And then there's a manual mode. You can set the shutter speed and the apertures. And then we have the scene modes here. Quite standard for the time. Now, one of the things I like about this camera is this selector. It needs a little bit of resistance to turn it. So if you imagine being out with this in your camera bag, I've had a few cameras in the past where you can knock the dial by accident and you can be in some other mode than the one you want to be in. You could be taking the picture because you're in a hurry to take a picture and not get the picture that you would like. On the back there's button for power on off, and then we have the review mode, the standard camera mode which displays everything on this LCD, and then you've got the camera mode again but displaying the picture in the viewfinder. And this has got the diopter adjustment if you wear glasses. There's a I button here for information, so this will toggle what you see in the display. There's also a button that takes you quickly to review, so you don't necessarily have to have it ever in this review mode, because if you're in a shooting mode you can get to it from pressing this button here. And then you have the menu button which takes you through, and then these are your cursors, including the middle button to select, so they will go through the menu system for you. So looking on this side, there's nothing else to report particularly. I'm just checking for anything I might have missed. So there's a microphone on the top for the video, and there's also a speaker so you can hear the video clip being played back. There's also a little light here. This is actually for the self timer, so that's obviously very useful when you've got this camera set up at a distance from you and you want to make sure that the picture's taken while you're kind of looking at the camera. This camera strap is fastened here to this eyelet. That's the lens. So once the lens is out, it's the glass elements inside that are moving around. Here's a little look at the standard menu, giving you the resolution of the images. Now, I've read that some of the people using this camera have said that the pictures can be a little soft and underexposed. It's a little bit dark, so it may be worth selecting some settings just to compensate for that, so you're not using the default settings out of the box, essentially. The camera can take relatively punchy shots with some nice colour. The lens has been remarked to be a little bit soft, so post-processing of images might be necessary. The ISO setting only goes up to 320, and again, users have said that don't go above 100 if you can help it. I think the quality of the images may be a bit over processed and they may have artifacts in, so that's something that you need to think about. Turn the camera on again. I'm going to select one of the adjustable modes, and I'm going to go into menu because there's a little bit more control in here. You may want to change the sharpness to be hard by default. You might find it too soft otherwise. You could try using a higher contrast as well. That will obviously depend on your light if you're outside, for example. So all in all, a nice little camera. It's something that is more of a museum piece, probably, but quite funky with it. I would say as well, it's probably a good camera, if you don't mind risking it, to give to your kids to use to learn about photography, because it's one of the ones which tends to be a little bit more basic in terms of its controls. It's got everything there, but it's just, it kind of doesn't put you off. It wouldn't put you off photography by looking too complex. So there we have it. That's the Konica Minolta, and it was only just after this actually that the camera business was discontinued and actually sold to Sony. So Sony took over Konica Minolta not long after this camera was made, but it certainly does look cool. let's try the flash. I'm going to force flash now at an angle. It's got all the usual modes, the continuous shooting modes, various flash modes. There's quite a lot in the manual for it, and that's relatively easy to find online if you do get hold of a camera that doesn't come with anything. The manual's quite nice because it does feature some interesting historic information in there about a prototype camera, and then remarking that you can set the sound effects in this camera to mimic some of the classic earlier film cameras. So that's quite a nice touch. So there you are, there you have it. Thank you for watching this video, and if you can like and subscribe, I shall do some more in the future for you. Bye for now.